You want a military story? Fine, I will give you a military story. All you fuckers on this board love to LARP with your tactical Mosin skinwalker hunting nonsense, but if you ever actually experience the horrors of war, you would be keeping your ass indoors for the rest of your life. You would probably never touch a gun again in your life, never act the same, never think about life from the same perspective. This one event basically changed the course of my life and altered my brain chemistry. Be me. I was stationed in Baghdad in 2006 during the Iraq War. I was serving as a combat medic, and at the time of this event, I was attached to a convoy unit. What's insane to me is that this was only a few months out from Saddam Hussein's death. It fucks me up that we finally got that son of a bitch. Took all those years to convict him of his war crimes, and after all of that hard work, it just didn't stop. The fucking power vacuum it created, the continued resistance, and the shit we had to clean up is just fucked. Thinking in my head it might all be over, and everyone might get to go home, just for those dreams to be squashed in an instant, was one of the worst feelings of my life. I had been a part of this effort for almost 2 years by this point. Even through all of the trauma and death, you start to tell yourself that that is it. Nothing else bad is going to happen, especially not to me. That last thing, that was it. Nothing bad will happen to me or my guys. It starts to become your new normal. This weird numbness, a kind of in-between state. You almost feel peaceful in between combat, because if your brain doesn't lie and tell you that it's all over, then your body stops being able to cope. So anyway, I am a part of this convoy, and we are on a patrol outside of this farming town. Supposed to just be routine. I don't want to make this too long, but let me give you an idea of how our convoy is set up. You've got your MRAP at the front. This is an armored truck, essentially. In theory, it's supposed to be resistant from any kind of mines that you can cook up, and keep the rest of the vehicle safe. In theory. If you want any vehicle to go up in flames, it's this one. After that, we've got a Humvee doing a visual clearance and scanning the horizon line. These guys are making sure that if shit is gonna go south, we know about it with enough time to react. After that, we've got 2 gun trucks, which I think is self-explanatory. Then behind it, we've got the logistics wagon, carrying supplies and equipment. Fuel, weapons, you name it. This is probably the most vulnerable point in the convoy, and why it's so far back and well protected. After that, you've got the truck which I am in, which is the medic vehicle. We are positioned here so we don't get fucked, but also so we can reach any wounded quickly. In the rear, we've got one last vehicle running comms with HQ and making sure we don't get ass fucked. This is all running in one single file line, with only about 20 or 30 feet or so between vehicles. We have to take this conga line of freedom between tight and shitty little farming roads that want to take chunks out of your wheels. We're out here for a number of reasons. The first is to make sure that we show presence in the area. This both reassures locals and shows that we're not to be fucked with. We can also sometimes be idiots who want to test their luck. The other reason that we're out here specifically for today is that we got a tip on some fucker in this village. Supposed to be some kind of gun runner who's been supplying insurgents and making bombs and shit from scratch. We are gonna sweep and detain and make him sing like a canary while also cutting off a crucial supplier. Everything is running as usual. I am doing double and triple checks on my gear. We are pulling closer and closer to this village, and so we are slowing to about walking pace. Gives us plenty of time to spot for anything. When we are this packed in, you can't ever be too careful. Then I just start to get this gut feeling. It's so hard to describe if you've never been in a combat zone yourself, but you learn to just sense things. It's like a sort of precognition that you can only develop through trauma, but the trade-off is that only bad things happen when you use it. So yeah, I just get this terrible feeling in my gut, and for a second or two time seems to slow down, and then everything just kicks off. I hear a blast and it deafens me, and all I can hear is ringing in my ears for a few seconds. I can feel the shockwave coming from the front of the convoy. I know immediately what just happened. Our front MRAP just hit a fucking IED on the road. The second I regain my bearings and composure, I am already flying out of the truck to see if I can help. I am crossing my fingers and saying a little prayer in my head that our guys are good. I'm just hoping the MRAP tanked the blast enough to keep them alive, even if the vehicle is FUBAR. We were going slow enough and had just enough distance that the second vehicle in the convoy did not take any substantial damage, but once I pass it, the scene I am met with is just grotesque. All I can smell is smoke and burning rubber and something else. And then I see possibly the worst sight I've witnessed in my life. The MRAP is just fucked. It is just ripped apart, and the armor platings are folded in like paper. I can see one of the tires still just spinning and kicking up dust, even though nothing is powering it now. Just continued momentum. I try to run over, and I'm shouting for a litter. I'm planning out what I'm going to do. How can I ease the suffering and keep him alive? And halfway through my sprint I am stopped in my tracks by the lieutenant, putting an arm across my chest. I am pulled back in one quick jolt. I am still trying to run with his arm around me, and he starts shouting at me. He tells me to stop and look. He tells me it is over. Looking inside the MRAP, one of the guys is just part of the fucking door now. I don't know how, but in the blast, part of him must have just fused right into it. What was left of him anyway. There is barely a trace of the other two. There's just a pile of bits where the insurgent was. Dumbass got himself caught in the blast, or it was a suicide mission, I don't know. Let me tell you, that is not a smell that you can ever purge from your nose. The smell of human flesh fused to metal, torn apart, and then burned back together again. It is just fucked. And then the yelling starts up again. One of the soldiers from the rear is yelling about more movement up ahead. We don't even have time to process anything. You don't have a single second in these situations. Even a second of weakness is death. A second of weakness, and we end up in bits and pasted back onto an MRAP2. We look up and there is a figure running across the hills, across some ridge. There is still a shit ton of smoke around, but we can make out the figure through it. This is where everything goes tits up. I don't think anyone was thinking straight. We all just kinda lost our heads and made every possible wrong choice that you could make in a situation like that. They must have been waiting for us. The intel might have been planted. Maybe we got unlucky. But either way, the orders were to sit tight. That is what HQ wanted. They wanted to reevaluate and decide what should happen next, if we would get additional help. I get to work on checking everyone over, but I can see from the corner of my eye, the lieutenant is just seething. He is visibly bubbling with rage. And not 5 minutes go by before he grabs a weapon and decides that someone needs to pay. He doesn't want to risk the convoy, but says he could not live with himself if he did nothing. Now, I understand. This guy was about my age, only in his mid-20s maybe. You don't get this far without being smart, without being able to think critically, even when you lose people that you know. But it's clear that this just broke something inside of him. We decide that we are not going to let him go it alone. He informs HQ of the situation, tells them we have more info, that we are going to follow this guy. They protest, they threaten, but I think the lieutenant has long gone by this point. He's in the nothing left to lose territory. We are moving out on foot. A detachment of us go with the lieutenant while the rest stay back to guard the convoy. We follow into the direction we last saw the guy, but it is hard to navigate. There is so much dust kicked up, and we are really starting to feel the heat of the day. We are moving up a trail now that's leading toward a dry wadi, basically just a ravine or valley that's burned dry. There is dust still kicked up and faint prints. We are on this fucker's tail. We are trying our best to balance proper scouting and safety with not losing him. And then things go from bad to worse. I get that feeling again. I hear a click, and everything seems to be in slow motion again. And then I just hear this sharp pop. I see the dust shoot up and can't see anything, and I just look over and can barely comprehend it. One of the guys, his leg is just fucking gone. He is on his back looking up at the sky. I rush over to tend to him. He can't even get his eyes to focus on me. I'm cradling his head, telling him to stay awake. But his eyes keep rolling back. He can't even respond to me in anything but a grunt. I am almost slapping him awake, but he just goes limp. Right before he did, he just kinda gurgled a little bit and let out a weak, "Sorry." The lieutenant did not even fucking stop. I shouldn't hate him. He was just doing what he thought was right. He didn't ask us to follow him, I know, but he should have been fucking smarter. He was in charge of the platoon, for fuck's sake. There is a technical just up in the distance. The lieutenant stops and tells everyone to hold, and when he does, it just goes up. The guy must have been nearby to set this off. It is clear that it's a fucking trap. The lieutenant finally sees sense and orders a retreat, but it is too late. More IEDs are triggered. The entire area is fucking encircled and was a trap, but we were too dumb and adrenaline fueled to realize. We lose another couple of soldiers due to the panic. It's like everyone forgot their training all at once. And then I see the lieutenant go up. I see the dust and dirt shoot up into the air. I see bits of flesh ripped onto the ground. And once the dust settles, I see that he doesn't have a fucking left arm anymore. I did what I could. I bandaged it, I put pressure on it, but I think the trauma was just too much. I managed to walk him out of there for a while, even got another guy to help me carry him, but he went cold. Managed to get his body back to the convoy, but it was way too late to do anything more. Like I said, worst day of my life. I should have talked him down, done anything to get him to see the bigger picture, but he just was not interested. I guess maybe he was just tired of living by that point. I know being responsible for someone else's life changes the dynamic, especially in your head. I guess he thought once he saw that MRAP go up and that body, he thought he had failed and deserved to die, or I don't even know. The minds of the young men, they are way too easy to destroy. HQ was angry, to put it mildly, but I think they'd understood we'd been through a lot and did not want to abandon a fellow soldier, the one in charge of our platoon no less, who had clearly lost a screw or two. What else can I even say? We pulled back, changed our approach a different day, and had better luck. No casualties that time. The guy was long gone. We knew that would be the case, but we found out enough. Shut that fucker down eventually. It felt like a piece of me could finally rest when we did, like I completed the mission in their honor. But yeah, this shit just plays on my mind all of the time. Sorry for the long rant instead of a spooky story. This happened to me in 2005. I was part of the United Nations Stabilization Mission in Haiti. One day, we were informed that criminals were in Cite Soleil, so we arrived by the dawn and rapidly started searching for them. People were very terrified, but my French isn't that good, so I almost can't understand anything they are saying. The sergeant is visibly nervous and approaches some group civilians and says something that from the few words I understand, he seems to be asking if they saw any strange movements in the area. An old man can barely say anything, and there is a pregnant woman who keeps on screaming. The sergeant is increasingly nervous and irritated now. I believe in my guts that something very bad is going to happen, but apart from people's screams, everything is calm in the background. There were not even bird sounds. Some guys next to me also get nervous as they see that man shouting at the people. In my mind, there is just a hammering thought that doesn't let me be quiet. Just thought all the time that this was the perfect environment for an ambush and the sergeant is an idiot for putting us in this situation. But all he does is shout at them. So when the time has passed and he is still without answers, this motherfucker just gets closer to the woman and punches her in the face. I ask if this was necessary, but he just tells me to shut up and says, "Go complain to the commander." Then I just tell him to fuck off, and he does not believe what we are hearing. The other guys don't either, but I feel like many wanted to say the same thing. The woman is on the floor with a bleeding nose and crying. I think, fuck all of this and go to her. If it was an ambush, we would already be fucked, or that idiot is shouting at them. I try to get her up, but the sergeant just kicks me when my back is turned. I could have fallen on the woman's belly, but luckily that did not happen. This guy is totally deranged. We will die if we follow him, I think. The corporal guy is uncomfortable because of our behavior and says that we are disrupting the operation, and he is right. The sergeant turns to him and tells him to shut up. I get up and punch him in the face. Other guys quickly separated us. They could have done it when they saw me get up, but they still let me hit this bastard. The sergeant gets batshit crazy and is swearing without mincing his words. He seems like one of those drill sergeants from the Nam movies. It's so ridiculous I can hardly believe it. I mean, it's well known that our armed forces were inexperienced, but I did not imagine it would be this much. I was just a temporary soldier, and I got surprised to see a career sergeant act like that. The corporal took a firm stance and continued to argue that we should focus on the operation. The old man from before is now even quieter. The woman gets up, and some other women with her are trembling. They didn't know what we were saying to each other in our language, and that just made things worse. Suddenly, a shot hits a tree near where I was. "Cover," I shout to my companions. I just hide behind a wall and get my FAL ready. I admit that this was my first time in a confrontation, so I was very inexperienced. You always do training in the military, but being in the crossfire is a whole other thing. I yell in French at the civilians to get down or go behind something. I can only imagine it made sense because they obeyed me. The shots were coming from a building in the north, so I took my FNFAL out of the sling and shot where the bullets were coming from. In a few seconds, it turned into a general shootout. We were all nervous, and then when we realized it, they stopped shooting. Corporal thought they had run out of magazines, and then told us to move to better positions. Honestly, I kept thinking that this was what they wanted us to think, and almost refused to follow that order, but in the pressure of the moment, I did it too. He just guided us to a concrete building. Guess we were about 400 meters away from them, but nothing happens, not even a single shot. A guy takes a rosary and starts praying. Another guy is looking with binoculars, but can't see anything in the previous building. We remained in this torturous position for 20 minutes until the shooting started again, but now it was coming from behind and seems to have too many of them. We changed our position and started shooting for a long time, and just like the other time, the enemy shots ceased out of nowhere. The corporal looks a bit strange and about to break, so he just walks out the door. Sergeant shouts at him to come back, but he just doesn't care and is shot in the head. It was the first time I saw someone die in front of me. His head after the shot was one of the most horrible things I had ever seen. I feel like I am going to break down and that it awaits us all. The rosary guy is now about to break down too. All he does is pray out loud and ask God to protect us. I don't understand what happened to the corporal, but feel a strange urge to leave the building. When that passed by, I got nervous again and went back to my ways. The others are equally nervous, but they try to maintain their composure. As for me, I was nervous with a bit of hatred and great desire to put a bullet in the sergeant's head. This guy didn't let anyone take a radio, put us in a disadvantageous position, and was just a complete jerk at all. We started shooting again, but for a long time no one fired back. I could only assume they were moving somewhere else. After an hour of hiding and nothing more happening, the idiot gave us the order to form groups of 2 and search the area. At that point, I was certain that my mother would not even receive my body back in a coffin, and it would just be another corpse left in Cite Soleil. I stayed with the guy who had the rosary. I will call him Daniel. He was a calm and attentive dude. We searched the area for hours, and after a while we found a guy with an AK, but he did not look well. There is a strange stare on the man's face. He looks worse than any addict I've ever seen in all of my life. There is fear, anger, and a third thing in his expressions, a third thing that even now I cannot explain. He has an AK without a magazine and just stares at us while repeatedly pulling the trigger. I shouted at him, drop the rifle and lay on the floor, but he just does not give a fuck and keeps on pulling the trigger. We just immobilized him and he did not even react, so it was easy to tie his hands with a nylon clamp. As I looked at the man's face, I began to seriously think that he was a zombie. Haiti has its own stories about zombies, and in most cases, they are used for slave labor, quite unlike the flesh eaters in the books and movies. I also started thinking about the possibility of someone using them as mercenaries. Would that be possible? They don't care about pain, they obey orders without question, and they seem more immune to fatigue than we do. What happened after that was disgraceful. We went back to the sergeant and showed him the guy. He then became convinced that the civilians in the area were helping the criminals and gave the order to clean up the area. When we questioned him, he replied that was what the commander had instructed him to do, so if we found any criminals there, well before we arrived. Daniel and I refused to participate in the massacre, so we ran away, were arrested, and then returned home as dishonored outcasts. This was covered up, and the commander managed to censor local radio stations. But the following year, there was a much worse massacre committed by the United Nations Stabilization Mission, and this time, they had to admit it after much pressure. It was in that same year that I learned of Daniel's death. He took his own life by hanging himself with a tie, hours before his sister's wedding. My basic training for the Air Force was at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas. After that, I was sent to Sheppard Air Force Base for technical school. After graduation, I received orders to McGuire Air Force Base in New Jersey. There, my job was aerospace mechanic. At first, I started on the night duty, so my sleep schedule was basically non-existent. My duties were basically lugging plane parts like anti-ice valves, igniters, ignition exciters, sensors, and more from the warehouse to the flight line. It was, for the most part, boring, repetitive work. A lot of sitting around and playing games on my phone, not that I was supposed to be. It had to be like 4 AM at this point. I was waiting for the other guy to come and drop off some parts to the flight line. I will just call him A. I was waiting by the back cargo area of the plane that we were working on at the time. I was sitting on a box, scrolling through my phone. A was taking an incredibly long time with his delivery, so I shot him a few texts. When they went unresponded to, I tried calling him a few times. The calls rang 4 times, then went to voicemail. I figured he was either screening his calls, lost his phone, or was just very busy at the moment. I waited and waited, and he never showed up. Eventually, I got a call from A's number, so I picked up. But it wasn't A's voice on the other end. It was just some random guy. He sounded like a grown man in his 40s. He said he saw I tried calling a few times, and said he found the phone on the ground outside of the base. I described what A had looked like, and asked him if he had seen anyone who may have resembled him. He said he had not. It's not like he would have been allowed on the base, so my only option was to drive out there and meet him. I asked him where he was, and he gave me the name of a nearby joint where I agreed to meet him. I walked to my car, which was parked in the closest parking lot, and I drove off the base towards the place he told me to meet him. While I was mid-drive, I remembered that A was sharing his location with me. The place the man on the phone told me to meet him was called Tara's Tavern in Cookstown. This was the closest town to the base. I pulled up the location of A's phone, and it checked out. It showed A's phone location right next to Tara's Tavern. This begged the question, what was that man doing here this late? At this hour, the place was not open, and there was 0 cars on the road. I pulled into a little parking lot and parked up. I stepped out and called A's phone again. The guy picked up, and he spoke in a noticeably lower voice now. I told him I was in the parking lot of the pub, and he said he was as well. He said in almost a whisper, "I'll be right over," and he hung up. It was weirder in the moment than it sounds explaining it now. I looked at the location on my phone to see if it was updating, but it wasn't. It seemed the location of A's phone was in the small patch of woods about 200 feet long and 200 feet wide. I tried calling again, and it went straight to voicemail. I looked around the whole parking lot, but did not see anyone. I was all alone, not even an occasional car passing by. I looked to the woods when I heard something over the sound of crickets. It sounded like someone's footsteps, and then I saw a man. It was him. He was standing just behind the tree line between the woods and the parking lot. He calls to me, "Are you alone?" And the sight of him was freaky as hell. Only his upper body was visible, which was just strange. I called back, "No, why?" as I inched my way closer to my car. This was one giant red flag. He called back, "Who are you with?" I did not answer that. I got in my car and drove back to base. I called my supervisor and told him that A was missing. I told him someone was hiding in a patch of woods with his phone. My supervisor told me that he was with A at that moment. He told me to meet them at the small building by the flight line. I met with the two and told them once again what I witnessed when tracking his phone. A told me what happened while off the base. He was approached by somebody outside of a 24/7 convenience store asking for a ride back to the base. A believed that he was actually in the Air Force at first and let him in the car. As they were driving, the man asked A to pull over by the woods so he could pee real quick. A obliged for some reason. As A was pulled to the side of the road by the same small patch of woods by Tara's tavern, he was not paying attention for a minute. While he was distracted, his door was opened by the man. Without a second to even react, the man was grabbing A's arms and squeezing them as he tried to pull him out of the car. A said he kicked at the man's groin area until he let go. He dropped his phone, and it fell out of the car during the struggle, but as he was free, he drove the car away with the door still open at first. The next thing that happened was he went back to base to talk with our supervisor. We of course called the police, and all went to Tara's tavern to check if the man was still there. The location of A's phone was no longer popping up on the map. It's possible the man destroyed the phone. All we did was file a police report. There wasn't really much else we could do. Never found the guy or got the phone back. Be Bulgarian. We used to have a mandatory 4-year conscription into the army when we were still in the Union. Both my grandfathers and my father were conscripted. Both my father and his father share stories about the army. My other grandfather does not. I asked my mother why one day. She tells me he saw an unclean spirit. What? I go to my grandfather and ask him what happened. He dodges the question for a while before telling me to have a seat while he tells me the story. He begins by draining half a bottle of wine in one go. Like many conscripts, he was put on border patrol. Had to patrol 5 kilometers of the Turkish border all alone. All he had was a coat and a rifle. He was under orders to shoot any Muslims trying to cross the border and escape to Turkey. He says he would constantly pass through ruined farms and sometimes villages, either destroyed in the First or Second War or just deserted because they were way too far from civilization. Somewhere along the way he would pass through an old graveyard. That is where he met her. At this point, he starts tearing up. He says that she was the love of his life. He's crying and talking about how beautiful she had been. At this point, my grandmother has heard something going on and comes to check on us. Sees my grandfather crying and hears his mumbling. She grabs me by the ear and drags me into another room. Don't let him fill your head with his rambling. I will tell you what fucking happened. She tells me the story as one of grandfather's friends in the barracks told her a long time ago. Every time grandfather would go out on patrol, he would return incredibly pale, cold and tired. In the middle of the hottest months of summer too. He stops eating at all. He has a vacant look. He is nearly unresponsive when spoken to. His mates just think that maybe he's not cut out for army life and leave him alone for a while. Still, they are a superstitious bunch, and when he starts acting too weird for them, one of them thinks that my father has been bewitched by something. They decide to tie a cross to his neck before he sets out to patrol. He doesn't even resist, just mumbles something incoherent. When he returns that night, the cross has been torn from his neck. He suddenly gets a fever. He insists that he continues going on patrol. His mates decide that they have had enough of this shit and follow him. He largely ignores them. They reach the graveyard. They finally see her. She is awkwardly standing near the graveyard fence with her arms outstretched on either side like a scarecrow. She is wearing a burial gown which does not blow in the wind. She suddenly turns to my grandfather and starts walking to him without bending her knees. She awkwardly closes her arms around grandfather without bending her elbows. They stand there, with grandfather whispering something to her for about 2 minutes. His buddies decide that they have seen enough and jump in to separate them. My grandfather goes completely batshit and starts hissing and clawing at them like a wild animal. The woman just returns to her original pose and stands completely still. No breathing. Her eyes are completely white. Grandpa's buddies are convinced that whatever this is, it isn't alive. They drag her into the graveyard where they find a really messy grave. They dig in it for a bit. It's empty. The woman remains completely still while they drag her into the grave. They decide to bury her with boulders before soil. They return to see her standing upright in her grave, pelted with boulders and buried. Grandfather recovers from the fever in an hour. He believes to this day she was just some village girl he met on the road. My grandmother thinks he was bewitched by a vampire. Pretty spooky, though they might just be fucking with me. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed the stories. The goal for the channel is 100k, so please subscribe, like, and leave a comment because it really helps the channel. Thank you for watching.